Today, I thought I would tell a little cross-dressing nightmare story because sometimes things go really wrong. This happened when I was 21 years old, so a long, long time ago. But at that time, when I was 21, I was still pretty deep in the closet. There was only a couple of people that knew about it, a couple of guys I knew that liked to dress up to, and of course my mom knew about it because she had caught me wearing her pantyhose when I was a teenager. Completely different horror story. But on this day I was going somewhere where I didn't want to be too flamboyant looking. It doesn't matter where. So I was basically dressed as a guy, except I had put on a pair of J.C. Penney black pantyhose. And when I started to put them on, I thought they were going to be darker so that with my jeans they would look more like socks. But after I got them on, they still looked like pantyhose, but they were really nice. They had super dark black reinforced toe, and the panty was really dark black. And it was just a regular panty, not control top, so got a little room to wiggle things around if you have to. But the legs, when they stretched out, they were like super sheer. Even though these weren't fragile, delicate pantyhose, they looked a lot more sheer than black. But I liked them. They felt nice. They had a little bit of sheen and shine to them, kind of slick. I liked them a lot. So I put those on, and I put on a black sports bra that hooks in the back. And I have long hair, so it hangs down around the straps, so nobody can really see the straps. And what else? Unfortunately, I decided to wear 2 chrome penis rings. Very small, very tight, and I wore them at the neck, the base of little Jess's head, up high, not all the way down. And why would I even bother saying that? Because they come into play later. But anyway, so I had a black graphic t-shirt on, loose-fitting jeans, and sneakers, and I'm out the door. Get in my car. I'm driving down this long country road that I've been on many times before, and up ahead I see police car lights coming on, and they're behind another car, and I'm like, uh-oh, somebody's getting pulled over. And the speed limit was 50 miles an hour. So when they got closer to me, I just let off my gas pedal, and when the car that they were behind got right to me, swerved right in front of me. I hit this car head on at about 45 miles an hour. It was horrible. And when I kind of realized what had happened, and I'm sitting in the car, and I'm like, I need to get out, I couldn't get this arm to work at all. At all. This arm I could move, but the hand wouldn't move. I couldn't move my fingers. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get my seatbelt off. And since the cops were already following this car, they were right there on the scene. And one of them ran up to me, asked me if I'm okay, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. And he tried to open the door, and it wouldn't open. And he said, well, help is on the way. I was lucky enough that the fire department was only about 2 miles away, so they were there really quick. And the impact, I couldn't see much of anything. My side windows were busted out, the windshield was caved in, and the hood of the car was buckled up in front of the windshield, so I couldn't see much except smoke pouring out everywhere and into the car. But that really doesn't have a whole lot of meaning to the story. It's just the reason why I ended up in the hospital wearing pantyhose and a bra. But the fire department got there, and I remember one of them yelling, "Is anybody alive in there?" And the police officer said, "Yeah, but we can't get the door open." So, blah, blah. They brought the big machine, Jaws of Life. They cut the door off of my car. They gently get me out, put me on a stretcher, and start jogging to the ambulance. And I just kind of raised my head up and looked at the cars, and they were gone. There was nothing left of these cars at all. But anyway, they put me in the ambulance, take me to the hospital. There's no need getting into all the details that don't matter. I'm in the emergency room. There's a lot of people around. The ER doctor comes in. He's asking me questions and looking me over, dressed, thank goodness. And the most he really did was poking and squeezing and asking questions. But then he went down to my feet and he slipped my pant leg up just a little bit and wrapped his hand around my ankles to feel for pulse in my legs. And he did it to both legs. And that was the first moment that I realized, oh crap, I'm wearing pantyhose and a bra. It was the first I had thought of it. But I don't think he even looked, and he was wearing rubber gloves, so he didn't notice anything. And after all that kind of settled down, one of the nurses came up to me, and my arms were hurting so bad she was putting pillows next to my arms in the bed rail so that I couldn't move my arms. And she said, I'm Sue, and I am going to be your best friend today, okay? And I said, okay, thank you. And there was another nurse, and she said, this is Lynn. She's going to be helping me out when I need it. She's a horrible person, but a really great nurse. So I was, okay. The doctor, I don't know if I'm forgetting any other details, but it doesn't matter. The doctor had ordered me to go have x-rays immediately. Oh, the only other thing was he had found a lump on the side of my head. Actually, it was the passenger side, so I had a lump on the side of my head that he was concerned about. He didn't like it. Not that I loved it, but sent me off for x-rays immediately. And before I left, I asked Sue, the nurse, I said, do I need to get undressed for this? And she said, no, not for x-rays. It's not a problem. We'll just take you there. Don't worry about it. And they took me for x-rays in the bed, just rolled the bed there. She went with me. They did all that, and we come back to the room. And I think I'll sit down. Okay, where were we? Sometime before they took me to x-rays, or when I got back, I don't remember. They had given me an IV and given me something for pain. I don't remember when it was. Doesn't matter. But after I came back from x-rays, I was just in the room for a little while, back in the emergency room, and the police officer that was on the scene came in and asked me how I was doing, and I told him, not well. And he said, well, you're damn lucky to be alive. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And he told me that it was a woman that hit me. He was following her, trying to pull her over because she was swerving and weaving down the road. And she really didn't get any serious injuries at all. Lucky her. And she was 3 times over the legal limit for alcohol. So she had already been arrested. And I was like, well, You know, that's good. Doesn't help me at all, but that's good. And he left, and some time went by waiting for the x-ray results, and the doctor came in, and it wasn't good. I was pretty broken, and I had 2 cracked ribs, and he said that because of the impact and the trauma, he wanted to do a MRI scan and a CAT scan, both. And then he left. And then Sue and Lynn, they got some kind of temporary cast to keep my arms from being able to move, and put some kind of temporary cast on this arm and one on this arm that went all the way down over my hand and through my finger. So now I'm really completely immobile. And she said, we're going to have to get you into a gown pretty soon for the MRI, and we have to make sure you don't have any metal at all on your body. And now I'm freaking out. There's so much going through my mind, and I'm freaking out. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. There's nothing I can think of that I can do. And they were going to pull my clothes off. And at this time in my life, I was terrorized by the thought of it. But I laid there for a while, and they're talking to me, just making sure. They said, you know, you can't go to sleep because of the head injury. So they're just basically talking to me, making sure I'm alert and awake, and trying to comfort me. And that went on for a little while. And then Sue said, well, let's go ahead and start getting your clothes off, and then I can also look for any other minor injuries or bruising. And I'm unable to breathe, and I had too much time to think about it. Normally, I mean, if you get caught cross-dressing, I would think it's like somebody walks into the room and catches you, and it's quick. But this, I had too much time to think about it. All the time I was there, it was the only thing on my mind. And because of the fear, the embarrassment, everything all wrapped up into one, I had a major erection. Just from the thought that they're going to pull my clothes off, and I'm going to be laying there in pantyhose. So I'm just freaking out. But Sue went down to my sneakers and untied one and pulled it off, and she's just looking at my foot, and so am I. You know, this really dark black reinforced toe and a much sheerer nylon leg. And she looks at it just for a second, and then takes her hand and pushes my pant leg up my leg a little bit, and takes her hand and just rubs it and said, Hunter, are you wearing some kind of nylons today? And oh my goodness, it was horrible. And I said, yeah, yes I am. And she said, oh, that's okay, not a problem. And she took my other shoe off and put them on a chair or something. I don't know. But she came up to my shirt and said, we're going to have to cut your shirt off because I don't even want to try to pull your shirt up over you and over your arms. It's just not going to be possible. And she said, is there anything else that you're wearing? And I said, yeah, I'm wearing a sports bra. And she said, okay, is it the kind that you pull over your head, or does it fasten on? And I said, it fastens in the back. And she said, well, that's going to have metal on it, so we're going to have to take that off too. And she said, are you wearing anything that's tight fitting that's going to be hard for us to get off, like a girdle or anything like that? And I said, no, I'm not wearing anything like that. And right now I'm still dressed, but I am scared to death. And she said, well, let's go ahead and take your jewelry off. And they took my rings, watch, earrings off, put them in a cup, put a lid on it, and said, let's just start with taking your shirt off. So they took scissors and cut my shirt all the way up and up to the sides, to the sleeves, so that it just fell off. And now I'm laying there in just a bra. And she said, do you happen to have any body jewelry or piercings? And now I'm like, oh, I can't believe this. I said, I have a couple of rings. And she said, nipple rings? And I said, no. And I said, no. And she said, oh, are you wearing knock rings? I'm not going to say the word. And I said, yeah, I have 2 rings. And she said, are they rubber or metal? And I said, they're metal. And she said, well, we're going to have to take those off too. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry. And she's just like, don't worry about it. And Lynn is right there saying, it's okay, don't worry about it. And they go down and, well, Lynn undoes my belt, unbuttons and unzips my pants, and like stretches them apart. And they both grab the sides and start wiggling them down, had me raise my butt up a little bit so they could get them under my butt. And they slide them down. Lynn goes down to the feet, or the legs of my pants, and starts pulling both legs while Sue's just guiding them on. And because I was wearing pantyhose, they slid off pretty easy. And Sue just rubbed my leg and patted it and said, let me just take a look at your legs. And she's looking at my legs. I am so freaking embarrassed. But then she just like stands up and laughs, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And she said, you were in a terrible crash. And I said, yeah. And she said, how did you manage not to even get a single run in your pantyhose? And then Lynn is looking at them and said, oh my God, what brand are they? And I said, they're JCPenney. And she said, I'm definitely going to buy those because apparently they're indestructible. And I said, I can't believe I didn't even get a run. And they're just kind of like laughing about it and everything. And then Lynn said, well, I want to take a look at the rings. And she had Sue pull the waistband of my pantyhose up and down a little bit. And now little Jess is just popping up, and hi, here I am. And Lynn grabbed little Jess, and she's looking at him and says, do the rings come apart? And I said, no, they don't come apart. They just have to be pulled off. And she said, can you get them off with an erection? And I'm so freaking embarrassed. And I said, yeah, I've taken them off before. They'll come off. And she grabbed the rings and she's pulling on them, and they're not moving. I'm too hard. They're not coming off. And she just let go and said, well, we'll give you a few minutes to see if you settle down. And so freaking embarrassing. But they're looking over my body because, now I'm just wearing pantyhose and a bra. And and they're just checking for bruising, and I had a couple of fractured ribs, so my side was bruising pretty bad. But other than that, my arms and my head, everything was remarkably well. And they let me lay there for a little while talking to me, and I don't know why they thought me laying there in pantyhose and a bra was going to make my erection go away, but it didn't. And then Sue said, well, let's take a look at the rings now. We need to get those off. And Lynn held my pantyhose up, and Sue's looking at them, and she's trying to twist them off, trying to get them to pop off, and they're not moving. So she said, well, we'll get to that in a minute. And said, let's go ahead and try to get your bra off now. And she said, I think we can manage to get this off without cutting it. So they lifted the bed up, and Lynn was pushing me forward so my back wasn't touching the bed. And Sue reached around and unsnapped my bra, and they managed to get that off with not a whole lot of trouble. And then reclined me back down and said, okay, well, we're going to have to deal with the rings now. So this is probably the best time to talk about the other part of the horror story. And there'll be a few guys that understand exactly what I'm talking about. I have suffered a lifetime with PE, premature ejaculation, lifetime. If I'm alone, it's okay. But if I'm with somebody, it's bad. It's bad. If I was with a woman, I would average 14 strokes in. And if I wanted to try to make it last longer, just do one stroke every 2 seconds. That's 28 seconds. Party over, out of time. That's it. And PE starts, I think, anything like below 2 minutes, if you can't make it 2 minutes. And I can't even make it 1 minute. It's horrible. And if you have it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So now I'm embarrassed. I'm mortified. And now I'm thinking about that, you know, they can't keep touching me and grabbing me like that. I'm not going to make it. There's no way I can get through this. And now that's on my mind with everything else, and I'm scared to death. But Sue is trying to pull them and turn them off. They're not coming off. So she's real close looking and trying to just turn the rings. And she said, you're supposed to turn them and pull at the same time? And I said, yeah. And she said, she laughed, you know. She said, so twist and pull. And I said, yeah. And she said, if I had a dime every time a guy told me that. And they're like laughing, and I'm like, that is not funny at all. But she's working with them and trying to get them off, and I can feel my legs starting to shake. And I know that it can't continue. I can't make it. So she said, well, let's give it another minute. You know, like that was really going to help. So they just left me laying there for, I don't know, another 2-3 minutes. You know, now I'm just wearing pantyhose with a pup tent in them. They gave it another 2 or 3 minutes, and Sue came back over and Lynn and said, well, let's pull the pantyhose down. So they took the waistband and they pulled them down to my thighs, and so somebody wouldn't have to keep holding them up. And she said, you know, I'm sorry, I know you probably don't want to be exposed like this. And I'm like, whatever. And she looks at it again and said, "These things are really tight. Do they hurt?" And I said, "No, they don't hurt." And she's looking at them again, and she's trying to get it to turn. And she said, well, they're not moving. And Lynn said, "Well, let's try some lubricant, like when a ring gets stuck on your finger." And I'm like, "Oh, this just, it can't get any worse. I can't take this." So Sue goes over and gets a tube of lubricant and puts some on her finger, and she's like pinching little Jess's head and pulling up and rubbing lubricant all around the rings really hard, trying to get up under the rings and everything. And I can feel myself shaking, and I know, this is, this feeling is a little too much for me to take. And I'm shaking, and she's rubbing lubricant all over it. And I said, "Stop, stop." And she said, "What's wrong? Did I hurt you?" And I said, "No, you didn't hurt me. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't do this." And she said, "What's the matter?" I said, I can't take it." And she said, "Oh, are you a little too excited?" See, at this time in my life, I had never even heard of the word, the phrase premature ejaculation. I'd never even heard of that word. I just thought, I'm a lightweight. But she said, "Do you have a problem with stamina?" And I said, my entire life. And she said, "Okay, we'll deal with it." And she walked over and got a towel, and I'm laying back, and she put a towel under little Jess, folded it up like to my neck, and told Lynn to hold the end up. She said, "Just hold the end up and give me something to aim at in case something happens." And Lynn is like laughing and said, "Okay, I can do that." And I just wanted to die. But Sue gets the lubricant, just held him, little Jess, and starts squirting some lubricant on it. And then she's just grabbing the shaft and rubbing it all in around the rings and on the head so that it can slide off. And I start shaking. And I said, "Stop. You're going to have to stop." And she said, "Well, don't worry about it. Don't try to hold it in." And she's rubbing it, and I went back, and she said, "Are you close?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm close." So instead of letting go and letting me try to calm down, she's just got little Jess in her hand and starts taking her thumb and rubbing the head really hard, pointing it up at the towel. She's just rubbing the head, and I lost it. I just lost it and started squirting everywhere. And I'm like doing everything in my power not to make noises and grunts and groans. And I couldn't believe that this was happening. But after like the last hard squirt, she just takes her hand and just pops them off. Both of them pop off at the same time. And she said, "There, we're all done. It's over with." And I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry." And she's just like smiling and said, "I have to deal with vomit, blood, and feces every day. A little sperm is not a big deal." And I thought, I'm so sorry. And Lynn is taking the towel and cleaning up little Jess and what's still oozing out. And I'm completely beyond mortified at this moment. But they got it done, and they both took the waistband of my pantyhose, and they went ahead and pulled off the pantyhose and got rid of that. So now I'm just laying there nude. And she went and got the gown, hospital gown, and they just laid it over me more like a sheet. And I waited there. That's really the end of that part of the story. I had to lay there for a while. They took me for the MRI, and then they took me to CAT scan, and all of that took, like, I don't know, maybe 3 hours or more to get all of it done. And then they brought me back to the emergency room, and when they brought me back in there, I told Sue I have to pee. I haven't peed all day since the morning. And she said, well, we're getting ready to take care of that right now. And she told me that they were admitting me into the hospital, and they were getting a room ready for me. And she said, you know, you're not going to be able to get up. They're not going to let you go to sleep for quite a while. And you're not going to be able to use the bathroom on your own. And I'm like, great, you know. But she was right. There was no way I could do it alone. So she said, have you ever had a catheter before? And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, well, it's going to feel a little weird, but it's not that painful. And we're going to go ahead and get a catheter on you so you don't have to worry about peeing. And I was like, great, you know, why not? So she goes over and gets this catheter with what looked like a 20-foot long tube, sets it down, and has another bottle of lubricant with like a tip on it, like a pointed, rounded off tip, and grabs little Jess again. And now it's been, like, you know, I said it's been hours since the incident, and she grabs little Jess and sticks the spout of the lubricant inside me and starts squeezing it. And me being me, I started getting an erection again. And she actually just laughed at me and said, you have the happiest penis I have ever seen in my life. And I said, yeah, well, it's getting a good scolding when I get home. And they're just laughing at me, but they get the lubricant in. Sue starts feeding the catheter tube in, and Lynn is pulling the wrapper back as she does it, and they're feeding it, and I'm like, how far does this have to go? And Sue said, well, watch the tube. And I'm like, okay. And she's feeding it in, Lynn's pulling the wrapper back, she's feeding it in, and then pee just started shooting through the tube. And Sue said, that's how you know when you're in there. So she pushed it another inch or so in, and then mashed some kind of a plunger that she said was going to inflate a bladder or a balloon inside that would keep it from coming out. Took the attachments off and said, we're done, that's it. And she said, this is all we should be doing to you. The worst part of this is all over with. And I'm like, thank goodness. It was like the first time I could even take a breath. And I was in there for just a little while longer, but before they took me to the room, Sue came up to me, Lynn had left, and Sue came up to me and said, you know, I know this is a really bad day. You're going to remember it for the rest of your life. I hope I was able to make it a little bit better, because I know this is bad. And I hope you have a speedy recovery and good luck and blah, 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 blah. And they took me to my room. And that's pretty much the end of the cross-dressing part of the story. I was in the hospital for quite a long time, but when I got out and when I was feeling better, it took a long time. But when I was able to actually drive again, I didn't have a car, so I borrowed my mom's car and went to a store and bought a thank you card and wrote a letter to Sue and Lynn, thanking them and apologizing for having to put up with me, and I just wrote them a thank you letter, and I took it to the hospital, went to the emergency room, and went to the desk and told the attendant that I had a card that I would like to give to Sue, and I didn't even know her last name. I just knew Sue. And I said, "Do you know who I'm talking about?" And she said, "Yeah, we only have one Sue that works in the emergency room. Do you want me to go get her?" And I said, "No, that's okay. Can you just make sure she gets this card?" And she took it, said, "Not a problem. I'll make sure she gets it." And I left. And then I drove to the fire department and walked in and thanked them for everything that they had done and went home. And that's pretty much the end of my nightmare story. Goodbye, everybody, and have a wonderful day.